What's up, everybody? It's the Inhuman One here, and today we're going to slay a monster. A monster that attacks when we are at our most vulnerable, when we are unknowingly drifting off into the recesses of our minds and the comfort of our warm, welcoming beds. This dreadful creature is known by many names across many cultures, but for the sake of this video, we will refer to her as the Old Hag, or Hag, a supernatural being infamous for hunting unsuspecting dreamers and strangling them while they lay hapless in a state of sleep paralysis. Well, sweet dreams. That's the end of this video. Just kidding, guys. But before we get into the logistics of how to send your literal worst nightmare to oblivion, let's go over what we know. After researching the origins of the Old Hag, it was actually quite difficult to determine her origins. Depending on what culture's folklore or sightings you're researching, each offers a different explanation, ranging from demonic entities, to distant relatives of succubi, to cursed spirits, goblins, and lastly to witches. Based on what we see in the film, the Old Hag seems to have the form of an undead woman, complete with rotting skin and that sweet sickly scent of death, which leads me to the conclusion that she is most likely to have human origins. As a result, it is logical to assume that she is either a cursed spirit or witch and not some otherworldly entity. Now that we have an idea of what she is, what are her powers and abilities? The Old Hag's primary form of attack is inducing sleep paralysis on dreamers. Once the targeted victim has fallen asleep, the Old Hag from the dream world immobilizes her prey, climbs on top of them, and strangles them, which results in a real-world death. An interesting detail to note is that the Hag's power seems to be correlated with both the belief in her existence and the level of fear being experienced by the dreamer. In all of the documented attacks, it is explained that each of the victims were being plagued with a series of sleepless nights, sleep paralysis, and overall anxiety over a period of days, weeks, or months after their acknowledgement of her existence. As each night passes, the Old Hag's grip on the victim seems to strengthen, pun intended, and eventually reaches a phase where she reveals herself and begins to strangle the dreamer until their eventual death. The Old Hag also has the ability to employ the use of minor illusions, which lends credence to her possible witch origin. In several scenes, the Hag takes the physical form of friends or loved ones in an attempt to add to her confusing and fear-inducing spell. I refer to this particular ability as minor illusions due to the fact that the only things the Old Hag can mimic are the physical appearance and voice. She seems to be unable to assume the thoughts and demeanor of who she is imitating. Lastly, the Hag has the ability to appear from any number of mediums in the dream world, whether it be from shadows, the other side of the door, an illusion, etc., as she makes her way towards her paralyzed victims. So now that we know what the Old Hag is capable of, let's analyze her weaknesses. First and foremost, the Old Hag can only harm people in their sleep. Despite the fact that this may seem obvious, it definitely limits the window of opportunity that she has to attack her victims. Another very apparent weakness is the fact that the Old Hag has incredibly limited mobility. Her primary method of getting from point A to point B is crawling on the floor towards the paralyzed dreamer. In various scenes, the Hag is depicted crawling towards her intended victim at a snail's pace. Lastly, the Old Hag, due to her human origins, shares weaknesses with other mortals and is vulnerable to injuries that can be inflicted to any normal person. So with all of our newfound knowledge, how do we defeat her? So in order to beat the Old Hag, the single most important factor in your survival and victory is your willpower. You must have the mental resilience to break the invisible bonds preventing you from defending yourself and attack. Despite the fact that each dream sequence begins with the dreamer's inevitable paralysis, the Hag typically has to traverse over to the dreamer and begin strangling them. This brief window of time is invaluable and must be used to gather your wits, understand the Hag as a visitor of your dream world, and regain control of your body. In the event that you fail, you have one final opportunity to dispel the Hag's paralysis and defeat her. Once she begins her attack, humans have an average of 20 seconds or so before they lose consciousness. This time must be used as a last-ditch effort to dispel the paralysis and destroy the Hag. Once the Hag's bonds have been released, the most effective way to defeat her without any trace of her returning to prey on you is, ironically enough, giving her a dose of her own medicine and strangling her. Knife wounds and other attacks seem to have little to no effect on her illusion forms, so once the deed is done, you will awake from the dream world and be free of the Old Hag's spell. Although this is not a method of complete destruction, it does prevent her from attacking the individual with the willpower to break her spell. Other dreamers plagued by the Old Hag must similarly follow suit and have the will to survive in order to prevent her attacks. A more pacifistic solution would be to avoid sleeping altogether, or to sleep supervised by other non-affected individuals in shifts. However, be advised that prolonged periods of wakefulness can result in a plethora of negative symptoms that over time contribute to the breakdown or disruption of critical body functions. Over time, the stress levels and negative impacts to health would decrease your quality of life to a point that you would no longer be living but rather surviving. In the end, the choice would be yours, but I can tell you that personally, I need my beauty sleep. So I definitely opt for a more direct solution. And that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment. And until next time, it's the Inhuman One signing out. Welcome to my universe.